Hey folks, it's Bear Gardener. It's time for part 3 of my reviews, opinions, however you want to look at it, takes on the new Covert Operations card reveals. Clearly, I've done 2 of these previously, so the links will be in the doobly-doo down below. You should probably go watch them. Or maybe not. I don't know, maybe you're just really interested in these particular cards, but we'll be taking a look at each of those cards that we've seen and chatting about them. So it's kind of cool because it's been a week since my last video. So we've had 20 total new cards to look at in various forms because we had the previews, the reveals that came out on the main cards Discord, and then we've had some stuff that was dropped during the OCC, which was also very cool. That's pretty funky. So I've thrown these all in. Just like normal, we're going alphabetically by nation, and then pseudo-alphabetically, mostly with some tweaks, because I want to do things in specific orders inside each of those nations. So we'll talk about each of the cards, see where we go. Should be a bit of fun. So, without further ado, let's go see what we've seen. As I said, first off, Britain. So we've got the first Brit card that we have is a 1 cost or 1 op cost infantry, the 10th Para Battalion. It is a 2-1, and on the face of it, therefore, a standard card. It's honestly kind of underwhelming. However, the deployment effect is going to be where it's at, and we have deployment gets +1/+1 and blitz if you have given an order this turn. So, a 3/2 blitz unit is pretty good. 1 drop, 3/2, 1 op cost. It's nice. There are, like, on the face of it, there are immediately, I've seen, like, people have been talking about this and, like, oh, this could go in commandos because commandos are wanting to play orders a lot, and we've seen that. We'll see people chat about that more, and we probably will see play in some attempted commando decks. I don't think it'll stick. So there are some issues, in my opinion, with this card. My overall opinion of this card is it's a little underwhelming. Because it's too conditional. Also quite slow when you actually take it into account. But Bear, I hear you say, it's a 1-drop. So this thing is a 1-drop blitz unit, and 1-drop blitz units are great, right? And on the face of it, I would generally agree with you. They tend to be really good. But this isn't a normal 1-drop. So a normal 1-drop is going to have either an op cost of 1 or 0, and therefore it's either turn 1 moves forward with blitz, or turn 2 moves forward with blitz because it has 1 op cost. This is a different beast. So this isn't going to do anything unless you have a minimum of 3 credits, because you need to play a 1 credit order, then you need to play this for 1 credit, which will give it blitz, but then you need a credit to take advantage of that blitz. So this is a turn 3 drop. So we would, comparatively, we'd be looking at 2 cost blitz infantry, and there are a few out there. So, like, you could compare this to 17th Infantry. So a pretty standard 2 cost blitz infantry from the US, and it has a deployment effect. It's non-conditional on its blitz, it gets that for free. 2 cost, 1 op cost blitz infantry, so drop it to the front line on turn 3 and pick another friendly unit and give it +1/+1. And it's a 2/2, and this would be a 3/2. Is the juice worth the squeeze there? I'm not sure. I don't think it's necessarily bad, and it's certainly interesting to see Britain getting units with blitz. Not a massive thing for Brits. But I think it would take some work. There are some things you could do, but We'll see. It's a little conditional for me. Next up, we have the 15th Recon Regiment. This is a 3-cost infantry. Has 1 op cost. It's a 3/3, which is it's a decent body. 3-cost, 3/3. I'm not complaining. It's a limited, so it's not special or rare, so we can see 3 of them in a deck, and it has a deployment effect. The deployment effect is really interesting. Deployment, target a unit. Full stop. It gets +1/+1 and guard when targeted unit deals damage. So you play this onto the board. You target another unit. I suppose hypothetically you could target yourself, but that seems unlikely. And then anytime the unit that you... It's kind of like pseudo pincer effect, but not, because it only applies once. Not to both units. Anytime you do that, you get +1/+1 and guard. Obviously, you're only get guard once, but the +1/+1 will presumably stack. So it has exponential returns on as long as you have a unit that's consistently dealing damage. Again, I've immediately seen people talk about commandos with this. And many of you will know I'm hyper enthusiastic about commandos and doing some stuff with it when Covert Operations drops, but this isn't it for me, and I will explain why. In a commandos deck, you're not... You don't have a vast amount of space. You're not wanting to run a lot of units, and any unit that you are running, you're going to want to really have some kick. Now, if this unit is part of this... the pool that you can get from Baker Street Irregulars, then it becomes a little bit more interesting. But on the whole, I don't... You need, like, in theory, if a commando triggers and does the ping and this is gaining, it could get huge, but you're taking up a space in the deck that you could use for another order or another way of getting commandos, and I think it's going to get tight. What I do think is an interesting use case for me, though, is protecting early game small bombers. So hypothetically, if you could get down a swordfish, one of my favourite cards, a card that I think is massively undervalued and underused because it's a really good card for its cost, and then drop this, targeting the swordfish. Every time the swordfish runs to bomb, this thing's getting +1/+1, and obviously it gets guard the first time to cover the swordfish or whatever else is next to it. There could be some interesting hijinks to be had with that. So I like this. I'm certainly looking forward to trying it out. It's not that I don't think it's a good card, I just think it's going to take a while to figure out exactly where it's going to fit. Again, the instantaneous response is to think when the target unit deals damage. Commandos are amazing for this, and there's probably some value in that, but I'm still not convinced there's a lot, because I'm not sure what it would be doing. If it had Blitz, we'd be into a whole new conversation, because if you could get this down into the front line before you start playing the Commandos monkey stuff, that starts to get interesting. But on the whole, I like this as a unit. I think it's an interesting design space. It's a decent body with the potential for some exponential gain in a relatively controlled way. It doesn't strike me as immediately being as ridiculous as some units. Sissio Sasto, we're looking at you. But it has got the potential to develop some value. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what we can do with this, and I think it's a nice piece of design. Again, nice to see the Brits getting some more good solid units that have potential. Speaking of Brits and gaining units, so next up we have the 7th Scottish Borderers. Now, given where I grew up, I'm always going to have a certain line into like the fact that I think the name is going to conjure some thoughts for me, and also I really love the artwork on this. This is a 2-cost, 1-op cost infantry unit. It's 1/3, so it's not overwhelmingly strong. It's got a decent body, though, and I've talked before about the fact that I like a 1-3 body, but it doesn't have blitz, and it is 2 cost. But the text here gets interesting. So, first of all, it's a limited card, and it has Intel 3. If you don't or haven't played around with Intel, because not everybody watching this will necessarily have done so, Intel is a mechanic where when you play a card with Intel, it reveals the knowledge of the number, the value of Intel, of your opponent's cards in hand to you, so you can see the cards that are in your opponent's hand. So for Intel 3, it's going to tell me what 3 of the cards in my opponent's hand are. It's interesting and fun, and you can use it. But Intel has never been super strong. It's never been massively potent, and this is interesting design space, because this is an attempt to take Intel in a whole different direction. So this card gains, while it's on the board, gives you globally, your excess Intel deals damage to the enemy HQ. Now, first of all, it's been clarified that this doesn't stack. If you've got 2 copies of the 7th Scottish Borderers on the board, this is still only going to trigger 1. I believe was the clarification, and makes sense, because otherwise this would be truly bonkers, even with the restrictions that I'm about to talk about. So, to understand the value of this, the first thing we have to do is understand how much Intel you can actually get make this actually have value, because the value in this unit is obviously that you are producing Intel. Now, previously revealed, there was the Lublin, which is a Polish air unit, which, while it's on the board, has the text, cards you play gain Intel 1. So that in and of itself could fit into this. And Britain-Poland is where this is going to see play, because there are only 3 nations, spoilers, there are only 3 nations in the game who have access to Intel. Britain, Poland, who are the core of Intel, the core mechanic for them, as an allied nation, and Japan. Japan has incredibly limited access to Intel. I think it has 3 cards that can grant you Intel. Britain has some, and the advantage that there are some exile units that count as both British and Polish, which means that you can get some extra Polish units in it. So Britain-Poland's where this is going to be at. So what cards do we have that might actually give value to this? So in the Britain Intel pool, the first card that we're going to completely ignore is resourcefulness. There is resourcefulness. It is the 1-cost order that tutors one of your number 10 commandos from your deck. Again, unless the borderers are part of the special forces pool, which they might be, because they were regimentally. There's some conversation to be had there, but anyway, unless they're part of that pool, I don't think this will see play in a commando's deck, so we can largely ignore resourcefulness. Also, it's only Intel 1. We also have another Intel synergy that already exists inside Red, and that's the Inniskilling Fusiliers. The Inniskilling Fusiliers, Inniskillen, it is pronounced Inniskillen, even though it is Inniskilling. Trust me, Scottish grandparents. Anyway, Inniskillen Fusiliers is the 5-cost infantry unit that gives you, when you play a card with Intel, deal 2 damage to a random enemy. Now that obviously synergizes nicely with this. It's a special, so you could run 2 of those, 3 of these, and then build around it. Otherwise, you're into exile and Polish options. So you have various ones that we can talk about, and we will. So we have obviously Legions synergizes with Intel. So if you use Plan West or something similar to put a Legions unit on the board, every time you play a card with Intel, your Legions units gain +1/+1. Legions being a 2/2 guard unit that just, it's kind of a token unit. But I don't know how much we're going to see that, because that gets clunky with the 12 Polish cards you can play. But there are some other interesting cards that we can use. So Orp or Zell, which is an Intel 1 cost order. Increase the cost of a known card in enemy hand by 2, which plays into Intel by making it harder to do. We have the TKS, which is the little tiny baby Polish 1/1 tank that really has next to no value as a 1 cost, 1/1, 1 op cost, 1 drop. But it does have ambush, not that relevant because unless your opponent has, like, anyway, your opponent would actually have to you'd have to buff it somehow to make ambush have any real relevance. But what it does have is that it plays for Intel 3. That's something to be aware of. Dropping that as a 1 cost with this and then finding ways to buff or use it could stack quite interestingly. There's Agency Africa, which is the 2 cost order. Add a copy of a random known card in the enemy's hand to your hand. That plays also for Intel 3, so that's another strong card for synergy with this. Obviously, there are units. There's the Lysander. That's the 2 cost aircraft that is an exile, has Intel 2. When the enemy plays a known card from hand, deal 1 damage to the enemy HQ. Again, that has some synergy here. Section 2, which is the Intel 1 2 cost order that draws a card. It's inefficient card draw, but does give Intel. But it's only Intel 1. Opliskwika is, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Someone Polish is going to tell me I'm getting it wrong, but there you go. I gave it a go. Is the 3 cost rather. It's not 2 cost, it's 3 cost there. I do have a cheat sheet in front of me. Is the order, it's an Intel 2 order, it is exile. Copy a random order in the enemy deck and gain HQ defense equal to its cost. And it's Intel 2, so again, could synergize. There's the Karas, which is the bomber. It's 2/2 bomber, which is 3 cost, 2 op cost, very slow, but has Intel 2, and at the end of your turn adds a section 2 to your hand, which is previously mentioned, draw a card order. Can be a weird pseudo card draw engine. Underground State, which is a 4 cost order, target unit retreats, target enemy unit, I should say, retreats, add a legions to your support line, and has Intel 2. There's Tarnov, which is more of a synergy, which is whenever you play an Intel card, add a legions to the support line and draw a card. That's the 5 cost special infantry. It's pretty strong. And lastly, but definitely not leastly, there is Act on the Intel, which is a 6 cost order, but it is standard, so you can run 4 of them. That is Intel 3, deal damage to target enemy equal to known cards in the enemy's hand. We'll stew on that for a moment, because that could be 6 cost if your opponent's got 5 cards in hand. That could be 6 cost, deal 5 damage if your opponent's got a full hand somehow. You could 6 cost, deal 9 damage, and it's target enemy, so you can hit the HQ. Not an amazingly played card, but it might be more of a seen one now. There is room here for some synergy with Intel. Do I think it's going to be a tier 1 meta deck? Probably not. Do I think it's going to see play? Yes. I think some people are going to have some fun playing around with Intel with this, because this is the first time we've started to see stronger payoff on this. And going back to the core of this card, excess Intel dealing damage directly to the enemy HQ would be very, very strong. If you can keep this around with things like Cup of Tea or a guard, it's got the potential to ramp some damage. Interesting. Not amazing. I don't think it's game-breaking, but I think it's a very interesting design space, and I'm quite excited to see where it goes, because it might see Poland see more play in something other than the traditional, we're just throwing out Legion, or Exile Air, which appeared for a while, but may have taken a hit with the loss of a card in rotation. Although, not that much of a hit, in my opinion. But yeah, it's an interesting card. I like it, I like the design space, looking forward to playing around with it. So now we reach a new nation, so we move on to Germany. And we get 15 Aufklariung, which I had to go look up the pronunciation for. My German is terrible. And the translation of. The translation, by the way, of Aufklärung is loosely enlightenment. The Aufklärung, historically, in World War II, were recon units that were attached to German divisions and were the eyes and ears of the divisions, riding about on bikes to recover intel, which is why I love the art on this card. I also love and hate this card, and we're going to talk about why. So this is a 2-cost, 1-op cost, 3/2 infantry that is standard. So far, so okay. Moderately good body, nothing earth-shatteringly broken about it. Then we have the deployment cost. Deployment. Develop a German countermeasure. This is bonkers. This is bonkers good. This is ludicrous value. And I will explain why. Because some people I don't think have realised quite how insane this card is yet. For 2 credits, I'm going to get a 3/2 body, which doesn't suck. Then I'm going to get to select from the pool of German countermeasures. 3 cards will be shown to me. Then I'm going to pick one of them to add it to my hand. I'm going to do this every time I play one of these, which gives me 4 free countermeasures every game. Those countermeasures are, as on the whole, incredibly strong. Germany has really, really powerful countermeasures. Insanely powerful in some cases. We start with something as basic as Careless Talk, which is the 1-cost countermeasure when your opponent deploys a unit, deal 3 damage to it, which can be crippling in and of itself, and I would not object to seeing with this. Lost Convoy. When the enemy deploys a unit, give it -2 attack, but that's rotating out. Thank the Lord, because it's free. So there is some sense here. We are at least seeing Lost Convoy go, because I will not lie, Lost Convoy from this would be insane. Because what this card would then say is 2 credits. Gain a 3/2 body, and your opponent's next deployed unit gets -2 attack. We have Scatter Tactics. When a unit attacks, give enemy units on the battlefield -2 attack until the end of turn for 1 cost as a countermeasure, which isn't terrible. But then we start to get to the good stuff. Stranglehold, 1 cost. When a unit is deployed, the enemy loses remaining credits. From the Deep. When your enemy deploys a unit, destroy it. Missing. Destroy a unit when moved to the front line. Envelop. When a unit moves to the front line, destroy all units there. Night Hunters. When the enemy deploys a unit, destroy it. Draw a card. These are things that you will add for free to your hand whenever you play this. Plus the new countermeasures that are coming out, the new units which synergize with countermeasures. This card is insane. It is too good. it will almost certainly need a nerf. Might be a hot take, might not be, but it's definitely my opinion. This card is way too strong. It is supremely versatile. It is just value on a stick. 2 cost, develop a countermeasure wouldn't be a terrible card. 2 cost, develop a countermeasure, get a decent body. Yes, please. Anyway, I won't overdo the point because we have quite a lot of cards to get through, but this is the one of the first cards that I've seen that I've really raised an eyebrow at the design space of. Next, speaking of countermeasures, new countermeasure for Germany, coolest name and really funky art, A Bridge Too Far. This is a 5 cost countermeasure. It's very expensive. At the end of the enemy turn, add a Panzer 3J to the front line if possible. Right. Let's clarify something. The Panzer 3J is a 4 cost, except now it's free, 2 op cost, 4/5 blitz tank. In and of itself, that could be quite a powerful effect, but then there's the follow-up effect. Otherwise, destroy all units there. For 5 cost, at the end of your opponent's next turn, you're either getting a free heavy body tank with blitz that you can use next turn, or you're destroying everything in your opponent's front line, plus any other countermeasure synergies you might be getting. It's a special, so it's not ludicrous, but it's incredibly strong if played well, and it is very late game, so credit cheat would be necessary to get real value out of this. But it's strong, and again, versatile, especially with enough synergy with countermeasures. I'm quite impressed with this. I think I don't think it's broken. I think it's strong. Next up, we get yet another countermeasure for Germany, which is fitting into the theme of where we've gone with my previous commentary. So this one is hit the drop point. 0 cost, which in and of itself, when you consider that you might be able to develop this for free by playing your scout, is pretty insane. It is limited. When the enemy deploys a unit, suppress it. Can affect a covert unit. Situational, yes. But it's free, and you don't have to include it in your deck. So long as you're running Aufklariung. So long as you're running 15 Aufklariung, you don't need to include this in your deck. You can just get it for free. And my god, could this be strong if you play it well. Since, in particular, I will note that you can have a pretty strong idea of when the first covert units are likely to hit the board, and Aufklariung plays nicely on curve to come into value just before your opponent has access to those 3 credits. This could be ridiculous. That said, I think it's nice that we're seeing an answer to Covert to stop it being super strong, and seeing some interesting synergy with another mechanic that's being promoted in this. Makes sense too. And it makes sense in the Covert Operations theming of the expansion. My only issue with this card is the fact that you could theoretically get it for free. But that's my existing issue at this point with all German countermeasures, even the elite ones. We'll see, but there's some potential there. this card, independently of everything else, is quite situational. Because suppressing a unit, it has to have something that you are suppressing it from. Lots of units do, but not all of them. Certainly it could be crippling for anyone who's trying to play into something like Alpine, or if you time it so that it hits the Baron of Ichi on a tokens deck. Kills a strong deployment effect. There are things it can do, but ultimately it's good but not silly, unless, of course, you don't actually have to include it in your deck to be able to play it. See my previous comments. Okay, so we're moving on now. We've moved to Italy. So we get a new Italian order. First of all, I love the art on this card. I really do. I think it looks fantastically dramatic. It's a really interesting piece of art. But moving on from that, the Dagger Strikes, cool name, is a 3-cost Italian order. Pin target unit. Then destroy it if it has the highest single attack on the battlefield. It's a special. We'll point that out, but so okay, it's conditional. Yada yada yada. It's conditional. I'll forget that. If you know how to play this card, it's not conditional at all. This is 3 cost to destroy your opponent's most powerful threat. End of. If you're playing it any other way, you're playing it wrong. And it's really strong. Like, really strong. In and of itself, I predict it will make Italy see some play in control decks. Really, the potential in this card is very high, and it will fit into a number of decks that I think will come out and play hard control. The value on this card could be huge. I honestly believe this might be a bit undercosted. We'll see. I might be wrong. Because it is, I know it's hard to judge in internal testing, and we'll see how it goes in the meta, but I'm not sure that 3 is enough. But we'll find out. But it is a very strong order, and it is a good sign for Italy, because it might revitalise us seeing some more of the... We are starting to see cards that are strong enough that might see more allied nations getting play, and it's also just a really fun, thematic, very Italian control card. So on the whole, I like it. I just think it might be just a bit strong. Okay, so Japan. So first Japan unit that we have to look at is the 51st Recon. So 51st Recon is a 2-cost, 0 op cost, Blitz 2/2 infantry. In and of itself, as a standard card, I have no objection to that. That's pretty good. 2/2 body with Blitz on turn 2? Yeah. Yeah, why not? The aggro decks aren't going to mind this at all. And then it's got a really interesting piece of text. When the enemy HQ gains defense, this unit gets equal attack. So this would be crazy. It's very powerful. If you're going to continue to see HQ defense gain being a thing, if nothing else, this deletes Glamour Boys, because this is a 2/2. Glamour Boys, when it deploys, gives the HQ 4 defense, which gives this 4 attack, which turns this into a 6/2, which is perfect to remove the 3/6 Glamour Boys. This is a very good card. Not game breaking. I don't think it's terrible. I don't think it needs fixing, but it's strong. It's going to see some aggro play. Its text is conditional and not always going to be super relevant, but it makes up for that in the fact that it is a good body for a okay price, but it's blitz and has 0 op cost. And we are beginning to learn the value of 0 op cost cards, and I think that lesson will continue to be taught to us by cards like this. I like this card. I think it's going to see some pretty strong Japan aggro play. Next, we get to a Japan order. Now, this is Carrier Battle, and this has provoked a lot of conversation on Reddit. Not on Reddit, rather, on Discord. But it probably has provoked conversation on Reddit if anyone's noticed it, but I just don't. Moving on. I mean Discord. On the Cards Discord, this has provoked some interesting conversation, and also I think will continue to provoke some interesting responses. So this is a 3-cost order. Deal 3 damage to anything. Target, HQ, unit, whatever. Add Carrier Battle to the enemy hand with all numericals 1 higher. Now, obviously, it's an elite, you're only going to see one of these, but it's a weird elite, because it bounces. So, how on earth does this actually stack up? This is one of those... Japan is getting, in this expansion, some brain-expanding cards. Carrier Battle, on the face of it, is terrible. It's awful. I pay 3 and deal 3 damage, giving my opponent the ability to pay 4 to deal 4 damage. Of course, when they do that, they give me the ability to pay 5 to do 5 damage. Tennis match. But, as I have mentioned in another video, Japan has some really good tools for buffing order damage. Proc 1 of those on this, get +2 damage on this, 3 cost, deal 5 damage, give your opponent a 4 cost, deal 4 damage order, because they're not getting the buff. But when they give it back to you, it becomes 5 for 5 plus whatever bonuses you've got. So, hypothetically, this becomes the most insane game of pass the parcel, and it's ticking. Will it see that much play? I doubt it, because it's just too much on the jank side. It's right up there with Saruga and the Elephant Ball, in that it could be bonkers fun to play around with, but is almost certainly not going to see a lot of play, because it's very, very clunky. Interesting idea, though. Moving on. Kwanishi E7K. This is a new Japan fighter. It's 3 cost, and it's a 1/2. It's covert, and it has a reveal text. Reveal text, as covert units are wont to have, is really interesting. Reveal gets +2 attack if it's your turn. So unless your opponent reveals this, this is a 3 cost, 3/2, 0 op cost fighter. And it's a standard. This will see play in some attempts at air decks, I predict, because it's quite strong. And if you can buff it, it gets even stronger. It'll certainly be a covert card you've got to keep your eyes open for. Is it broken? Is it crazy? No. Am I going to go into a whole thing about this card? No. I think it's just a good, interesting card that will be fun to play around with. I think it'll find its way into some air decks of varying flavors, and I think it will earn its place quite nicely in those decks. Okay, so now we have the Shoge Detachment. This is another Japan covert card. So again, 3 cost, all covert cards so far, 3 cost, which makes sense. This is a 1-op cost, 5-1 infantry. 5-1. Come back to that in a minute, because that's usually a really weird stat line. This card also has Destruction. Draw a card. It's a standard. I like this card quite a lot as a covert card, and I will explain why. This card is deal 5 is 3 cost, play it face down. Then, when you use it to attack, it is pay 1, so you've paid a total of 4, and it then get the destruction result and the attack. Unless, of course, you like at some point it's going to die. So this card really could quite simply read deal 5 damage for a card for 4 cost, which honestly I would probably consider playing in certain cases. I think it's actually quite good. I honestly do. I think there is value here. This is a sting. This is a very just outright sting covert card. It just snaps out, snipes, deals 5 damage to something. It either removes a big threat and draws a card, or it pings 5 damage to your HQ and says, remove me and replace me in your opponent's hand, or I'll deal 5 damage again. And of course you can buff it once it's been revealed and make it stick around longer, or give it smoke screen, or do something weird with it, which could also make it very potent. I think it's pretty good value. I don't think it's broken, but I think that there is value in this. And again, there are some aggro decks that would probably consider running this. It's not hugely overcosted. Okay, so we are moving on to Poland. And we arrive at a new Polish order. First of all, the art on this order. Cool. So, this is a 2-cost order. It has Intel 1, and it's special. And the order text is, the enemy discards a random card, draw a card if it was known. Okay. So, this is very much synergistic with the Britain deck that we were talking about earlier with the Scottish Borderers. The reason being, you want to play this when all of your opponent's known cards, hand is known cards. The reason being, at 2 cost, discard a random card, it's okay. At 2 cost, discard a random card and draw a card. That's really good. Like, really good. That's great discard value. And there's so talk about discard. Similar order. The obvious comparison here is U375, because it is a 2-cost German order that is your enemy discards a random card with a cost of 5 or less. That's a limited card, can only discard a random card at 5 or less. This, for the same cost, could discard a 8-cost card and draw you a card. This is very good. This has the potential to be incredibly strong value. And I think it's definitely going to see play in a number of discard decks, which we might see a few more of. And I certainly think it will see play as value in the deck that I was vaguely outlining earlier that tries to leverage intel. Whether that deck will actually stick and do anything, totally different question, but I really like this card. Because I think it is a very interesting order. It's conditional value, so it requires a bit of thought and consideration as to when and how you play it. But played well, it's incredible value. So we are moving on again. We have arrived at the Soviet cards. And our first Soviet card is another covert card. We're seeing a few of these now. So again, it's a covert card, so it's 3 cost. It's an infantry, 1 op cost infantry. It is the 213th Rifle Regiment. This is a 5/3 infantry that has ambush, which is really strong. 5/3 infantry with ambush is a standard card, and it's face down, so your opponent doesn't know it's ambush when they attack it. Ooh, that could be really bad, right? Especially at 3 cost. But the reveal text here is really big. Because the reveal text is, lose 3 credits at the start of your next turn. So, in effect, this is a deferred 6 cost 5/3 covert ambush infantry. And that's very expensive. Even for a card that could theoretically be a big ouch for your opponent, or just give you some big hitting power. I don't know, for me, whether this is going to see much in the way of play, because it's so expensive, and without some help, the Soviets don't have a really great way of soaking up big cost hits like that. Like the tempo loss for my next turn, having 3 less credits. I don't know. I'm not sure. It's interesting, but I personally think it's weak source. Someone's probably going to prove me wrong, but I don't. The juice is not worth the squeeze for me here. Okay, so we are rounding the corner towards the end of this list of cards, and we have arrived at the US of A. And the first card we see is yet another covert card. This is an elite covert card. This is the 133rd Ironman. It's covert. It is a 1 op cost 4/4 infantry. It's not a lot for me. I mean, 4/4 infantry for 3 isn't bad. But the reveal text on this is the kicker, and the reason that your opponents are going to have to start getting really proactive. Reveal. Deal 3 damage to the enemy HQ for each turn spent in the front line. Right, so it's conditional. You got to keep this in the front line and keep it covert, which is going to be challenging. But if you can manufacture a way to do that, and I'm sure someone's going to figure out some interesting OTK decks that do, this could be insane. But I personally think it's too niche to be amazing. You've got to deploy it, move it to the front line, and then keep it alive. And you really want to keep it alive for at least 3 turns in the front line to get 9 damage out of it on reveal, plus the 4 damage it represents. So then you're getting 13 damage. Pretty strong, but very conditional. And it's in a nation that isn't massively equipped with ways to protect things in the front line. There's a lot of trading going on, and the US isn't dealing a lot in guards. That said, I mean, if you can escort this up front with some solid guards and stuff like that, and have it hang around, there's going to be some ideas that you could play to make something out of this. But in the grand scheme of things, I don't think it's a world-breaking elite. But I do think it's got potential, and I do like the idea. I like the design concept because it adds the risk factor on how long you let your opponent's covert units hang around before you deal with them, and what's the price when they reveal. This one could have a very big price. Pretty cool. So now, disclaimer time before we dig into the last few cards here. The last few cards here are all packaged together very deliberately, because they all feed into the same thing, which is a very new stacked mechanic thing that I want to go into in a bit of depth, because I think it's really interesting. This is a 5-cost, 5/4 Blitz, 1-op cost, I should say, Blitz Infantry. 121st Infantry Regiment. It is a standard card. It is very expensive. When you look at the cost of it, this sits as a very natural replacement for the 2nd California. That's, I think, for me, the place where this naturally is going to sit, because that is also a 5-cost, 1-op cost Blitz Infantry. 5/3 reduces damage, pain in the ass card that everyone hates and is rotating. It can be very, very awkward. This has the potential also to be incredibly awkward, and I do like its artwork because its artwork is suggestive of its potential to be awkward. Like the Curly, this is a standard. Obviously, it's only got 4 defense, so it's good trade value. It's going to see play in US frontline. It just is. But to understand this, we are going to have to understand the destruction effect. So, destruction. Add an outrage to your hand. Okay, so now we need to know what an outrage is to have any idea what the actual depth of value of this is. So, outrage. This is where it gets so much fun. Outrage is a 1-cost order. Outrage. Develop a retribution. Wait, what? Okay, now we're getting into nested development here. So now, this is like a mini version of the research cards. So you're going to play your 121st. It's going to go into the front line. Then you're going to get it destroyed. Then you're going to get an outrage in your hand. Then you're going to pay 1 to see 3 from a pool of 12. We've been told there are 12 retribution cards. You will see 3 and pick 1 to add to your hand. We have seen 3 retribution cards, I believe, and we're about to have a look at them. Retribution number 1. All the retributions, by the way, are orders. And have cool art, because this is really interesting. So this is a 2-cost order. Deal 5 damage, target unit. 2 cost for 5 damage does not suck. This is almost the hammer, and doesn't only target ground unit. Next retribution is also a 2-cost order. This one is 2 cost. Deal 2 damage to target unit. Draw a card. This is also really strong. This is Convoy HX 175. Only you get to damage a unit, and it costs 1 less. You get 1 less card out of it, but it's card draw with unit destruction in, by the way, a nation that really wants card draw. Okay, so far, so these are relatively potent, but okay. Targeted Retribution stuff. Cool. The final one we've seen, 5 cost. Retribution. Deal 2 damage to all enemy units. This is strong. This is really strong. 5 cost, 2 damage to all enemy units? This is like a broader strat bombing. This is just slightly less good than carpet bombing. This is crazy strong, if you see it. Now, obviously, you're going to see only a quarter of the pool each time that you trigger access to this, each time that you are able to develop a retribution. And it costs you. Something has to trigger to give you an outrage. Then you have to play the outrage for one, to then develop the retribution, which you then have to pay. So there's quite a squeeze to get the juice, but so far the juice is very strong. Which is going to lead us to our final US card, which, when it was first released, because it had no context until the OCC and we started to see what retribution actually was, Yank. This is an elite order. It is 6 cost, and its text is deceptively simple. This battle, when you develop a card, also develop a retribution. Now let's parse this thing just a touch. First of all, this is battle long. So for 6 cost, for the rest of the battle, whenever you develop a card, develop a retribution. We've already seen a number of develop options out there, but in particular, we just swing back to here. Outrage. Develop a retribution. Yank. Whenever you develop a card, develop a retribution. So now, the 121st dies. Then we pay 1 to play Outrage, at which point we get to develop a retribution twice. A pool of 12, giving us an even broader chance to hit whatever other insane effects are in this. Now, I'm going to be honest. I'm not, so far, a huge fan of this. This is getting just a tiny bit too crazy Hearthstone weird for me. This is reaching the point whereby cards become other cards, or maybe more than one card, and then smack you about the face with an effect that you're not quite sure was ever even going to arrive. And I'm not the world's biggest fan of this as a mechanic. As a design concept, it does not hugely appeal to me. It's interesting, but it also has the potential to be just bonkersly strong. On a very serious level, there are ways that this could get terribly out of hand. So I hope we keep a careful rein on how much more of this we push into. Yank is okay, because Yank is an elite and it's 6 cost, so it is not going to be all over the place. Which is good, because if it was, like, any time this goes off in a game, you are in for a wild ride, whether you are playing this card or watching it be played against you. Or, even better, you've played it and your opponent's played it in some weird-ass US ramp mirror match that just becomes crazy, go nuts, everything explodes. Because the theme so far, of course, of all of the retribution cards, which I do not expect to change, is blowing stuff up. We'll see. Let's see where it goes. I don't want to judge too early. I will always be the advocate of taking our time to judge. But it does trouble me as a design ethos. all this nested stuff, like the return of the research orders, plus this, plus hidden information from covert cards, plus like the develop pool in general, is starting to get information overload. We're starting to reach potentially overly heavy cognitive load for a card game, in my opinion. Now, I'll be honest, I have very specific opinions on this. It's one of the reasons that I personally stepped away from Hearthstone, which I played avidly from release for a while, because I thought it was just cool and fun, was when this started to happen, and cards, and I happen to know, because I've watched his reviews, which you should go watch too, because it's really cool to see different opinions, and we do differ in some of our opinions on this. I know J. King has also pointed out that it is the same reason he fell out of love with Hearthstone, which is that there was too much of this jank where a card suddenly becomes another card and another card, and now I'm not quite sure what I'm playing against anymore. Which, for some people, is fun. For those of us of a more a tactical mind, can get unfun very quickly. On the whole, 20 more cards, lots of interesting stuff out there. Time, I guess, to summarise. Okay, so 20 cards, and over an hour of me talking. I am trying to keep these brief, but it's hard, because there's a lot of cards here that are worth talking about, and have the potential to be interesting. We've seen a lot of information to parse and process in here. We really have. We are seeing a lot of different design space. We are seeing cards that I like. We are seeing directions that I'm interested in. We've seen at least one card which I think is insanely overpowered, and I will continue to point that out. I think it will be an issue. On the whole, though, Covert Operations is definitely shaking up to be a big shift in the meta. We're definitely going to see some new archetypes, and some returning archetypes, and some different play options. And we do have the potential to see some fairly crazy new builds. There's some cool stuff out there. We've got new mechanics, and as I've pointed out, if they are handled softly and with a certain degree of sensibleness, they have the potential to be okay. If, on the other hand, they are not handled carefully and become too prevalent, which the develop thing is getting in that direction, they have the potential to be very overloading and possibly extremely overfacing, particularly for newer players. I am quite pleased that we've seen a few bits now that seem to fit into different things. In particular, we've seen at least one card now, which I've seen two cards that look to be solid replacements to the US frontline deck, which has always been one of those decks that I will advocate as being a really good deck to learn the game on. And I think they play into each other quite well. Because I do, but what we've seen is interesting, fascinating and exciting, and I look forward to discussing more about it. I will be back next time, assuming everything goes along the progression that I'm expecting it to. It'll be about a week from now, and I'll be back with probably another however many cards, somewhere between 14 and 20, depending on how many drop. Should be really exciting. Looking forward to seeing what goes on. Also interested to hear your opinions, whether you agree with me, disagree with me, stuff that you're in. You can comment down below. You can find me on various social medias. Also, shiny new thing down in the description below will be an invite link to my shiny new Discord, which I finally got around to sorting out, so you can come and talk to me there. You can also find me on various other cards, Discords and places. As always, I really hope this was interesting. I hope people find it useful, and I hope that you're as excited as I am for Covert Operations at this point. Stay well, be good human beings, and I'll catch you next time.